The first thing I remember was the cold. Not the sting of winter air or the chill from an open door, but the sterile cold of a hospital room. The kind that settles into your bones and tells you something went very, very wrong. A soft beeping echoed somewhere near my ear, steady and calm, completely at odds with the panic rising in my chest as I opened my eyes. For a second, I did not know where I was. Then the bright fluorescent lights above came into focus, and a nurse leaned over me. "Miss Whitaker," she said quietly. "Welcome back. You are in the emergency room in Austin." My throat felt scratchy, my head heavy, and there was an ache running along my side that made every breath feel borrowed. "What happened?" I managed to whisper the words raw. She hesitated. "You experienced significant trauma. We stabilized you. The doctor will explain more in a moment." My vision flickered and then sharpened again. Trauma. The word sank into me slowly like ice through a crack. I tried to move, but even shifting slightly sent a sharp reminder through my ribs. Panic fluttered, then steadied, as if some part of me already knew what had led me here. I looked down at my hands. There was a hospital bracelet on my wrist, my nail beds pale. A plastic blanket rustled as I breathed. I ran my tongue across the inside of my mouth, metallic. Fear and memory tasted strangely similar. The nurse adjusted my IV and spoke softly. "You came in unconscious. Paramedics said there was an incident at a residence in Round Rock." Round Rock, my hometown, my parents' house, the place I had driven to for Thanksgiving 48 hours earlier, believing I could survive one holiday weekend without history finding me. The air in my lungs felt heavy. I closed my eyes and images began to flicker across my mind. A front porch with chipped paint, a dining table set with floral plates, a forced smile from my mother as she adjusted the napkins one more time, my sister Caroline swirling a glass of wine and talking about real estate like she invented it, my father Ray giving me that familiar look of mild disappointment, the one he wore even when he tried to sound proud, a text alert on my phone while I stood in their kitchen, my name on a property document I did not sign, my house, sold, my name erased with a forged signature. My breath caught and a sharp ache pulsed again. I opened my eyes. The nurse watched me concern in her face. "Can you tell me who hurt you?" I stared past her at the ceiling for a long moment. I could hear echoes of that day more clearly now. The disbelief when I saw the email. The way my father leaned back in his chair like everything happening was perfectly reasonable. "You owe us Lauren. We raised you." The memory of the words hit harder than the physical pain had. That familiar tone, ownership disguised as love, sacrifice twisted into debt. My fingers curled slightly on the blanket. I remembered trying to leave. I remembered a hand grabbing my arm. I remembered the sharp edge of the table as the world tilted. I remembered silence, the kind of silence that does not comfort but swallows. And now, here I was, not in my bed in Austin, not in my own home, in a hospital piecing together the cost of going home for the holidays. A doctor entered the room with measured footsteps, a clipboard in hand. "Miss Whitaker," he said kindly, "you have bruising along your torso and side. We are monitoring you to make sure everything remains stable. If you feel increased pain or dizziness, tell us immediately." I nodded slowly. My voice was steady when I spoke again. "Who brought me here?" The nurse answered. "Emergency services." A neighbor called. A neighbor. That meant someone saw enough to act. That meant the truth was not buried. The doctor exchanged a look with the nurse. "Officers would like to speak with you when you are able. They waited earlier, but you were sedated. Police, of course they were here." This time, the law was not a threat hanging over me if I dared to speak. It was the door out. I sank back into the pillow, breath steadying. My body hurt. My heart felt scraped thin. But beneath all of that, something else stirred, quiet and absolute. Resolve. I was done being the one who kept the peace by sacrificing my own. I was done being the quiet daughter who tried to earn softness from people who only understood control. My father and sister might still think I was that girl who stayed silent to keep the family calm. They did not know I had learned something powerful. Silence is not loyalty. It is surrender. And I was finished surrendering. If you want to understand how I ended up in this bed breathing hospital air and seeing everything clearly for the first time in years, you have to start where it all began. 2 days ago, Thanksgiving weekend, a holiday meant for gratitude. Instead, it became the moment I stopped giving anything to people who only knew how to take. Before I tell you the rest, let me ask you one thing. Have you ever walked into a place called home hoping to find warmth, and instead found warning signals you ignored until they became impossible to deny? People like to believe childhood shapes us with love first, and only later with pain. But for me, it was the opposite. Pain introduced itself early, quiet and polite claiming space where affection should have lived. I grew up in a 2-story brick house in Round Rock, Texas, on a cul-de-sac where neighbors waved from driveways and porch lights glowed warm in the evenings. From the outside, my family looked normal. My father, Ray Whitaker, had a firm handshake and the kind of voice people trusted on first introduction. My mother had a soft smile and always asked guests if they wanted sweet tea or pie. My sister Caroline, 2 years younger, had a talent for charm. But what the neighborhood did not see was the language spoken behind closed doors. Not yelling, not chaos. Something quieter. A hierarchy built on praise rationed like currency and affection granted only to the one who fed their pride. Caroline learned that language first. She was the golden child from the moment she opened her eyes. Bright, charming, effortless. When she walked into a room, my parents straightened, ready to applaud. If she brought home a drawing from school, it was framed on the fridge like a museum piece. If she recited a poem in the living room, they clapped as if she had performed on a stage in New York. When she asked for something, it arrived. Not because we had wealth, but because my parents found pride in giving her anything she wanted, and me. I learned early that my achievements did not produce the same warmth. I was not the child who inspired celebration, only expectation. When I brought home a certificate for first place in the regional science fair in 5th grade, I remember holding it carefully, imagining my parents might smile, might even hug me like they hugged Caroline for smaller things. I walked into the kitchen, certificate pressed to my chest, and my father glanced at it while stirring his coffee. "Good," he said, as if he were signing a receipt. "You are supposed to do well." My mother nodded and returned to chopping onions. Caroline, sitting at the counter eating cereal, smirked like I was a guest performing tricks not her sister. Later that evening, she taped her ballet participation ribbon next to my certificate on the fridge. My parents cooed over hers. Mine sat unnoticed. That pattern became the script of my childhood. Caroline was congratulated for existing. I was acknowledged only for proving I had value. When I succeeded, it was expected. When she succeeded, it was celebrated. Praise for her was affection. Praise for me was obligation. And when I tried to express how it felt, I was told I was sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. It got worse as we grew older. Caroline discovered she could bend rules because my parents bent with her. I discovered I was the rule, not the exception. At 16, after months of working part-time at a bookstore and saving every dollar, I bought my first used car. A silver Honda Civic with an engine that coughed when it was cold, but it was mine, and I was proud. I washed it every weekend. I drove it slowly, responsibly, grateful. Caroline did not ask to borrow it. She simply took the keys one afternoon while I was studying. When the phone rang 2 hours later, my stomach dropped at the tone in my father's voice. "Come home. Now." The car sat crooked in our driveway. Bumper-dented front headlight shattered. Caroline stood beside it, wide-eyed and trembling, rehearsing innocence. I remember touching the hood still warm, feeling the scrape of metal under my fingers. "What did you do?" I asked gently, not accusing, just stunned. Caroline burst into tears. "Dad," she cried, "I did not mean to, it was not my fault." And just like that, the narrative shifted. My father turned on me as if I were the one holding the keys at the moment the car hit the mailbox down the street. "This is why you do not buy things without discussing them with us," he said sharply. "Irresponsible choices lead to consequences." I opened my mouth, but my mother shook her head, warning me against speaking. Caroline sobbed into her hands, and they comforted her. She crashed my car, but somehow I was the disappointment. It was the first time I understood something that would take years to name. In my family, truth did not matter as much as the story my parents needed to believe, and the story was always the same. Caroline was precious. I was strong enough to survive neglect. They rewarded her fragility and resented my competence. The world saw a quiet, polite family. What they never saw was the currency of that silence. They never saw how affection was given only where it reflected well on them. They never saw how quickly love turned to critique when I needed understanding more than achievement. And they never saw how Caroline learned to weaponize tears the way other children learned multiplication tables. I learned something too. I learned to swallow emotions before they could spill. I learned to keep my voice level even when my chest tightened. I learned to measure worth not by approval, but by effort. Silence became survival. When my parents withdrew warmth, I turned to books. When they ignored my victories, I made plans. When Caroline basked in approval, I studied the cost. I never envied her. I pitied her dependence on praise she did not earn. But pity does not erase harm. It builds distance. And with every quiet slight, every moment, my success was treated like a duty I moved a little further away. My childhood did not break me. It trained me. It taught me that some homes are not built to shelter but to shape control and call it love. I grew up not yearning for their attention but planning my escape. Because long before Thanksgiving of this year, long before I ended up in a hospital bed remembering every warning sign, I understood one truth. Some families do not raise children. They create mirrors, and the day you stop reflecting what they want, they crack you to pieces so they do not have to face their own emptiness. That was the world I came from, and that world was waiting for me when I returned. When I turned 18, the morning felt like any other in our house, but inside me there was a quiet finality, a decision already made. I woke before everyone else, sunlight spilling through my childhood blinds, illuminating the desk where I had spent night after night studying as if knowledge itself was a door I could pry open with persistence. My acceptance letter to the University of Texas sat folded in the top drawer, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I had already memorized every word. A full academic scholarship, a future earned, not gifted. While other kids I knew celebrated departures with family brunches and photos on porches, my morning was silent. My mother moved around the kitchen humming as she baked muffins for Caroline to take to her cheer team send-off later. My father read the newspaper and nodded when I walked in, as if this day held no particular meaning. Caroline scrolled her phone, uninterested in my existence as usual. When I said I was leaving for Austin, my father offered a distracted good luck, followed by a reminder not to waste the opportunity. My mother hugged me lightly, already turning away to check the oven. There were no photos, no tearful goodbyes, no mention of pride. The only warmth came from the Texas sun outside as I loaded my 2 suitcases into my car, the replacement vehicle I earned through summer jobs and scholarships after the Honda incident. Driving away felt like the first breath I had ever taken without someone else's permission attached. College was not freedom at first, it was transition. I spent long nights in the UT library surrounded by other students who were discovering themselves in groups, while I discovered what it felt like to make decisions without a shadow of family expectation hanging over me. But independence once tasted becomes addictive. I studied marketing and data analytics, fascinated by the precision of understanding human behavior through patterns rather than manipulation. I worked at a coffee shop in the mornings, interned with a local startup in the afternoons, and sometimes caught only 4 hours of sleep, believing exhaustion was a temporary price for a life I could call my own. While other students posted game day photos and gathered on 6th Street, I learned how to file taxes, how to negotiate salary for internships, and how to stretch $20 across 5 days without sacrificing dignity or nutrition. Every task I did myself made me stronger. Every milestone I reached without applause made me steadier. I did not miss home. I missed the version of family I never had. But gratitude replaced longing. Gratitude for distance. Gratitude for the realization that absence can be peace, not punishment. After graduating, I stayed in Austin, moving into a small studio apartment near Zilker Park. My furniture consisted of thrift store finds and a second-hand couch I carried up the stairs with a friend from my internship. I still remember running my hand across the chipped edge of the kitchen counter my first night there, thinking, this is mine. There is power in claiming space no one can take credit for. I joined a tech startup as a junior marketing strategist. The office smelled like burnt coffee and ambition filled with whiteboards scribbled with ideas and energy drinks stacked like neon currency. It was chaotic and underfunded, but I thrived. I took on projects no one else wanted. I stayed late not for validation, but for autonomy. I learned faster than I expected. Eventually, my ideas became the ones people turned to when budgets were tight and stakes were high. In that environment, success was tangible. It was measured in conversions and growth graphs and pitch decks to investors. Unlike childhood, effort equaled outcome. By the time I turned 30, I had saved enough to buy a small bungalow in Round Rock, not far from where I grew up, but worlds away in meaning. It was modest with creaking floors and a backyard that needed constant attention, but it was mine. I chose the paint colors. I assembled the furniture. I planted rosemary and basil in clay pots outside the kitchen window. When the keys were handed to me at closing, I sat in the empty living room, knees tucked to my chest, and let silence settle around me. This silence did not suffocate. It comforted. It was not the silence of survival. It was the silence of ownership. My parents sent occasional text messages during those years, not out of love, but duty to a script they believed families were meant to follow. Holidays, birthdays, quick calls with comments woven subtly to remind me I had once been part of their household, as if that connection obligated me to return emotionally. "How are you?" my mother would ask, voice gentle but shallow. "You still keeping busy?" My father rarely spoke more than a few sentences. "Proud of you," he would offer, tone-clipped like pride cost something, and he was rationing it. But pride without presence is not pride. It is performance. Sometimes the old ache tried to rise the urge to prove something to people who never truly saw me, but therapy changed that. I began seeing a counselor in my late 20s when the pressure of success felt heavy in a way I could not explain. I told her about the silence of my childhood, how affection was conditional, how success felt like a shield I forged to exist. She taught me something simple and transformative. You do not owe anyone access to your peace. Boundaries were not walls. They were doors with locks. Locks I had every right to use. So I did. I answered calls less. I returned messages slowly. I learned to let guilt pass over me like a breeze instead of clinging to my skin. My life became quiet, intentional. Morning runs along Lady Bird Lake. Coffee at a local shop where the barista learned my order and asked how my week was going. Promotions that I earned without stepping on anyone. Dinners with friends who laughed without competition, who hugged without agenda. I was not lonely. I was whole. Every year I grew stronger. Every month I built a life defined by choice, not reaction. And then, at 34, when I believed time had softened everything, when I thought I could handle one quiet Thanksgiving visit home without reopening old wounds, I learned something important. Distance does not erase entitlement. It only delays its reach. And some people do not return to your life to reconnect. They return to reclaim what they think they own. I built everything myself. But going back reminded me that not everyone honors what you build. Some simply wait for the moment they think you owe it to them. November arrived in Austin the way it always does, with mornings just cool enough to make you believe winter might finally visit Texas for more than an afternoon. I remember standing in my kitchen sunlight hitting the backsplash. I tiled myself, stirring a pot of coffee and feeling that familiar contentment settle in my chest. My life was steady, predictable in the best way. I had plans that weekend to finish a campaign proposal and maybe meet friends for brunch. I was not thinking about family. I had not thought about Thanksgiving beyond a passing thought of maybe ordering takeout and watching a movie marathon. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and froze. Mom. I stared at her name for a second too long, as if it might change to a coworker or a spam caller. It did not. I let it ring once more, breathing slowly, then answered. "Hi, Mom." My voice was cautious, polite, the measured tone I reserved for people who could twist warmth into obligation without warning. "Oh, Lauren, honey," she began, and the sweetness in her voice sounded practiced, like she had rehearsed the tone before dialing. "It has been so long. How are you, darling?" Darling. She rarely used endearments unless she wanted something. I am well, I said evenly. How are you? We are good, she continued, cheerful in a way that did not match her usual clipped politeness. We have just been thinking about you. Your father and Caroline really miss you. Caroline misses me. That alone should have told me everything. There was a pause, then the line softened the way paper folds before tearing. We would really love to have you home for Thanksgiving. It has been too long. Family needs to reconnect. Her tone dripped with nostalgia that had never existed. I stared at the steam curling above my mug. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, like her voice had reached past the phone and pressed into my space. Thanksgiving, I repeated slowly. I had not spent a holiday with them in 4 years. Not because I did not believe in family. I did. Just not in sacrificing myself to maintain one that never existed the way they pretended. Yes, she continued brightly. We will have all your favorites. Your father has been talking about seeing you. He knows how busy you are, and he is proud you know. Pride delivered secondhand is rarely genuine. I knew better than to accept that sentence as truth. Behind her lilting tone, I heard something else. Control disguised as invitation. Performance disguised as affection. They wanted proximity, not connection. Still, I listened because years of conditioning do not vanish just because you rebuild your life elsewhere. I told her I would think about it. Her voice lifted in triumph before she caught herself. Of course, dear. Let us know. We love you very much. We love you. Words spoken like a script, not a feeling. She hung up before I could respond. I put my phone on the counter and exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that reaches all the way down to memory and unearths things you thought you buried. I stared at the plants in my kitchen window leaves bright and reaching toward the light. I had grown roots, soft ones, safe ones, and just like that, a gust from the past tried to pull them loose. I told myself I would not go. I told myself boundaries meant holding ground even when sentiment tried to seep in through cracks. But boundaries wobble when nostalgia wears the mask of kindness. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Caroline. Do not embarrass Mom by saying no. She already told her friends you are coming. No greeting, no warmth, just entitlement delivered in digital ink. That familiar spark lit in my chest. Not rage, recognition. Caroline had always led with assumption. Assumption she deserved more. Assumption others should comply. Assumption I existed to maintain her narrative. And there it was again. The trap disguised as tradition. I turned the screen off and stood still waiting for my heartbeat to settle. I knew how these dynamics worked. They extend sweetness like bait, then add pressure when you hesitate. They make you feel obligated for peace that never actually arrives. But here is the thing about distance. It gives you clarity, and clarity turns manipulation into something you can step around instead of fall back into. I did not need their table to feel like I belonged somewhere. I already belonged to myself. And yet, there was another feeling buried under all the logic. Curiosity. Closure. A desire to walk into the place that built my silence and see if it still had power. I told myself I was strong enough to go for a weekend and leave unchanged. I convinced myself that showing up did not mean surrender. It meant choosing to face the past from a place of security. I convinced myself this time would be different because I was different. So I texted my mother later that evening. I will come for Thanksgiving. Her reply came fast. Wonderful. We cannot wait. That should have unsettled me more than it did. I was not returning home for warmth. I was returning for confirmation that I had outgrown the need for it. I packed light. I filled my fridge so I would come back to comfort. I sat on my couch with a blanket and let myself believe that intentions could protect me. Looking back, I realized something. Sometimes we do not go back because we miss people. We go back because part of us wants to prove we no longer need their approval. And sometimes we walk right into the fire because we think we are flame resistant. Before I drove out of Austin that Thursday morning, I paused by my front door, fingers resting on the key I had worked so hard to earn. My sanctuary, my independence, my proof. I whispered quietly to myself, you are going for closure, not connection. But closure is tricky. It does not always end the way we plan. Now let me ask you something. If someone who hurt you asked you to come back in the name of family and tradition, would you have gone? Be honest. The drive to Round Rock that Thursday morning felt familiar and foreign at the same time. The highways I used to know by heart looked wider, shinier, lined with new coffee shops and apartment buildings. Progress does that. It moves even when you are not there to witness it. As I turned into my parents' subdivision, I noticed the manicured lawns, the wreaths on front doors, the plastic inflatable turkeys wobbling in gentle November wind. Outside, everything looked festive, warm, welcoming. Inside, I knew better. My parents' house sat near the end of a cul-de-sac, just as I remembered. The once brick exterior now faced with mismatched siding that tried too hard to look modern. A cheaply renovated kitchen visible through the window's stainless steel appliances against laminate flooring with seams you could see from the driveway. I parked, took a slow breath, and told myself the visit had an expiration date. 48 hours. I could survive 48 hours. My mother opened the door before I even reached it. There she was in a fall apron patterned with leaves, wearing that bright too-wide smile reserved for guests and performances. Lauren, sweetheart. Her voice floated light and rehearsed. Look at you, come in, come in. Inside, the smell hit first. Roasted turkey cinnamon from a pie cooling on the counter. Sage stuffing the faint sweetness of yams baked with marshmallows. A sensory postcard of American holidays. I stepped into the kitchen where heat from the oven mingled with tension so thin you could slice it with the carving knife resting nearby. My father stood at the island carving the turkey with the seriousness of a surgeon. He turned, offering me a nod that tried to masquerade as affection. There she is, the successful one. His tone sat somewhere between pride and accusation. Caroline entered next, wearing a fitted sweater dress and that confident grin she always used when she believed she had already won something. She hugged me the way politicians do, all touch and no connection, then stepped back and looked me up and down. You look good, she said, though her eyes carried something else. Busy, I am sure. It must be exhausting keeping up with everything alone. There it was, the dig tucked inside a compliment. My mother clapped her hands softly as if to dismiss any discomfort. Let's all be grateful today. Family together. That is what matters. I forced a polite smile and placed the small bouquet I brought on the counter. The flowers looked out of place among the perfectly staged decor, like sincerity in a room dressed in imitation. Dad folded his arms, eyes lingering on my keys. Did you drive alone? Yes, I answered. He nodded slowly, something calculating behind his gaze. Well, family sacrifices for each other, he said, as if declaring a principle I was expected to uphold. I pretended not to hear the implication. The table was set beautifully golden chargers under porcelain plates, cloth napkins tied with ribbon, a centerpiece of faux pumpkins and eucalyptus stems. The kind of presentation meant to say we are doing well, even if you knew it stretched the truth. Dinner rolled out like a performance, each dish placed carefully, each sentence spoken as though someone was recording. Turkey, mashed potatoes, whipped just right, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce, buttery rolls. It all could have passed as a picture in a holiday magazine if not for the undercurrent threading through every interaction. My father toasted with sparkling cider, raising his glass. To family and to having our Lauren home, he said, pride tinged with control. Caroline leaned forward, voice warm but edged. So, how is your house in Round Rock holding up? You know the one you said you bought all on your own. My fork paused mid-air. Yes, I said calmly. It is doing well. Must be nice, she murmured, swirling her cider like it was champagne. Having no one to compromise with, no one to answer to. Must be peaceful. Or lonely. My mother tapped her napkin to her lips, avoiding my eyes. I felt that familiar sensation in my chest, the one pulled from childhood. I straightened my posture slightly, a move my therapist would recognize as reclaiming space. I like my life, I replied. And yes, it is peaceful. Caroline smirked. Peace can be fragile, you know. Things change fast. My father's knife slid through the turkey, each slice a punctuation mark. Well, families share burdens. That is how we stay strong. Sometimes individuals forget what they owe. He looked right at me when he said it. I breathed slowly and tasted the stuffing savory and warm. I stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of something more dangerous to people like them. Control. Conversation drifted to Caroline and her new ventures. She launched into a monologue about real estate markets flipping houses, how some people do not understand the power of leveraging assets for opportunity. I recognized the performance. She spoke loudly enough for me to hear the subtext. Ownership is flexible. Nothing is really yours alone. I excused myself to refill my water, stepping into the kitchen to breathe. The faucet hissed softly, the only honest sound in the house. I caught my reflection in the microwave door. Composed, older than the girl who once stood here. Stronger. My mother joined me quietly, smoothing her apron. Your sister is doing big things, she said softly, pride coating her words like glaze on a ham. I nodded. I am glad for her. I meant it in the only way I could. My mother sighed, placing a hand on the counter. Lauren, sometimes people need a little help to get ahead. Family should lift each other. I set my glass down gently. I have always lifted myself. She did not reply. Instead, she patted my hand briefly, then returned to the dining room as if she had fulfilled a duty. I followed, my head held steady. The night carried on with laughter that never reached me, stories that circled the table but avoided truth, and glances exchanged like secret agreements. I sat there, part of the scene, but not part of the family, aware of every unspoken expectation pressing against the edges of civility. By the time dessert was served, sweet potato pie with a pecan crumble, I felt the shift. Not in them. In me. I knew then what I had walked into. A gathering crafted not for connection but for claiming. A reminder that in their eyes my independence was temporary and my success negotiable. They believed family ties were ropes, not roots. As I took a bite of pie, tasting cinnamon and sugar layered over tension, a thought settled like a stone in my stomach. Peace does not always come from staying away. Sometimes it comes from walking straight into the place that taught you silence so you can walk out knowing you owe nothing. I sat at that table surrounded by food and false warmth and braced quietly for what I did not yet know was coming. But even then, I sensed it. Something had shifted in the air. Something was already moving beneath the surface, and I was not the only one who felt it. I woke the next morning to a vibration on the nightstand, sharp and insistent. My head felt heavy, the kind of fog that follows uneasy sleep. The guest room in my parents' house looked the same as it had when I left for college at 18, only stiffer, like a memory staged rather than lived in. Lace curtains, a dresser with brass handles, a quilt my mother used to praise as proof we were a wholesome family. The illusion of comfort without the substance. The phone buzzed again. I reached for it, still half turned toward the pillow, expecting a work reminder or a news alert. Instead, a notification on my lock screen froze me mid-breath. Property ownership transfer confirmed. For a moment, the words did not register. I blinked, sat up slowly, rubbed at my eyes, then opened the notification. There it was. A confirmation email from the county records office. My house. My name. A completed deed transfer. I opened the attachment, hands suddenly cold. My signature stared back at me, only it was not mine. The strokes were too smooth, too confident, as if someone had practiced writing my name until they got close enough to believe no one would question it. I felt a thrum in my ears, a slow rising heartbeat, disbelief curving into understanding like a shadow slipping under a door. No. I whispered it into the quiet room as though denial could rewind what I was reading. My house. The sanctuary I built. The one place in the world that felt unquestionably mine. I tapped into my emails, searching, scrolling, eyes darting. A loan document filed. A second notice. My mortgage paid off in a lump sum. A new mortgage opened under a different name. Caroline's name. My breath caught. The room tilted slightly. Reality catching up in fragments. They did not borrow from me. They erased me from my own home. Heat rushed through my chest, not fiery rage, but something colder, sharper. Betrayal so calculated it did not need raised voices. It only needed signatures and arrogance. I pushed the blanket away, stood on shaky legs, and walked downstairs, phone clutched in my hand. I heard the clink of forks before I saw them. Caroline sat at the kitchen island eating leftover pecan pie for breakfast, scrolling her phone like the world had aligned perfectly with her desires. My father stood by the window sipping coffee, staring at the yard as though supervising something only he could see. My mother rinsed dishes, humming, avoiding eye contact even before I spoke. I held up my phone. My voice came out steady, too calm for the storm inside me. "What is this?" Caroline barely glanced up. "Oh, that." She waved her fork like she was commenting on the weather. "We needed to consolidate assets. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal." I stared at her. "My house is in your name." She shrugged, took another bite. "Paperwork moves fast when you have the right contacts. Besides, you are doing well. You do not need it like we do." The casual tone sliced deeper than yelling ever could. My father set down his mug with deliberate calm. "Family helps each other, Lauren. You owe us. We raised you." There it was. The sentence that had always lived underneath their smiles. Debt disguised as parenting. Ownership disguised as love. My mother dried her hands on a towel, still not meeting my eyes. "It is just a house. We are family. You will understand one day." My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a step back, needing air, needing distance from the audacity in their voices. "I am leaving," I said, voice clipped. "We are going to fix this." Caroline laughed lightly, a sound void of warmth. "Fix what? It is already done. You should be grateful it stayed in the family." That word hung in the air like smoke. Family. A word they used like a leash. I turned, heading for the door, fingers tightening around my phone. But before I reached the entryway, I felt movement behind me. My father stepped in front of the door, blocking it without raising his voice or his hands, just standing there, solid, unyielding. "You are not running away from responsibilities," he said. "This is how families survive. We support each other. You have had your turn." I inhaled sharply. "Move." Caroline stood now, arms folded, eyebrow raised in mock pity. "Do not overreact, Lauren. It is just paperwork. You always take things so seriously." Something in me snapped then. Not loud, not explosive, but quiet and final, like a rope reaching its limit and splitting in silence. I tried to push past, but my father did not move. I lifted my phone to call someone, any one muscle memory reaching for safety the way a drowning person reaches for air. Caroline slapped my hand, the phone flying, hitting the tile with a crack. The sound sliced through the kitchen. My chest tightened. That was enough. I stepped around them, reaching for the device, but pain shot through my ribs as my father's arm collided with mine, and suddenly I stumbled. The edge of the island met my side with a jolt that stole my breath. Then the floor rushed up, a flash of pain, a soundless moment where the world narrowed to white dots and ringing in my ears. No yelling, no chaos, just a collapse of air and control, then darkness. Peaceful for a fraction of a second. False peace. When I surfaced again, lights glared overhead white and unblinking. Sterile air filled my lungs and voices murmured through cotton fog. A nurse called my name. A monitor beeped. The world returned in fluorescent fragments, reality cracking open like ice across a lake. When I opened my eyes again, it was not my parents standing over me. It was fluorescent hospital lights. The first clear thought I had in the emergency room was not pain. It was humiliation. Not the kind delivered by strangers, but the kind only family can carve into you. The nurse's face hovered into view again, soft eyes scanning me with concern. She held a clipboard pen poised, but waited like she knew pushing too soon would break something fragile. "Miss Whitaker," she said gently, "we need to ask you a few questions. Can you tell us what happened?" The room hummed with fluorescent light, every beep from the monitor, a reminder I was breathing alive, conscious enough to choose how truth would unfold. I swallowed throat dry. I fell. The lie came too easily, like slipping into old shoes you wish you had thrown away, but never did. Her eyes narrowed, not judgmental, just knowing. There are patterns medical staff recognize, signs unspoken, but unmistakable. Ribs that tell stories. Bruises that line up with restraint, not accidents. Silence that screams louder than shouting ever could. She didn't press. Instead, she adjusted my pillow with deliberate tenderness. If you remember more, you can tell us later. She was offering a door. I shook my head, not ready to walk through it. Not yet. A few minutes later, 2 officers entered quietly, like they understood hospitals are sacred ground where chaos must come in whispers. One stood by the foot of the bed, hands clasped. The other pulled up a chair, voice calm. Miss Whitaker, paramedics found you unconscious. Neighbors made the call. Report mentioned a possible altercation. Do you recall anything? I stared at the blanket draped over me, fingers tracing the stiff fabric. I remembered everything. The forged deed. Caroline's dismissive shrug. My father's body blocking the door like I was a child grounded for speaking out. The blow. The floor racing up. But memory is not always the truth we choose to share. I kept my voice steady. I lost my balance, hit the counter. They exchanged a look, disbelief mixed with resignation. They see it all the time. People hurt most by those who insist they love the hardest. The officer nodded slowly. If anything changes or if you feel unsafe, call us. We take these cases seriously. He left a card on this bedside table, a lifeline waiting to be acknowledged. When they stepped out, silence wrapped around me again. Not peace, stillness before a decision. I stared at the ceiling, breath measured. A familiar heaviness tried to climb back into my chest. The old reflex of minimizing harm done to me, explaining it away, protecting the very people who fractured me. Emotional codependency, the tether I thought I had severed years ago, tightened for a moment. That's the cruelty of growing up in a house where love was a currency and you were expected to earn it. Even when they take from you, some part of you still whispers defend them. But that whisper sounded smaller now. Distant. A ghost habit. I touched my side, winced, inhaled. And then the truth rose, not emotional, but cold, mathematical, like data aligning into a result. They didn't steal from a child. They stole from a woman who owns her life. It was not rebellion. It was realization. I did not owe them quiet. I owed myself protection. That thought sharpened into resolve, so clear it felt like glass settling into place. I was done being the daughter who absorbed damage like duty. I was done playing loyal to people who treated my life as a resource they could harvest. I reached for my phone on the rolling bedside tray. Screen cracked. Battery low, but alive, like me. My thumb shook slightly as I typed, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of emerging truth. I opened messages and typed 2 words to the only person who could see what this really was, Maya. Need you. Maya Brooks had been my closest friend in Austin since my first startup job. Smart, precise, and one of the youngest real estate attorneys at her firm. A woman who understood contracts the way surgeons understand arteries. Someone who once told me property law is just the law of power dressed in paperwork. If anyone could dismantle what Caroline and Ray built on forged ink, it was her. The typing bubbles appeared almost instantly. Hospital, I sent back. Family issue, understatement of the year, but enough. Her reply came like a command. I am coming. Do not speak to them. Do not sign anything. Do not leave with them if they show up. Focus on breathing until I get there. I exhaled tension, loosening, clarity blooming. A nurse entered again to check vitals. You need rest, she said, adjusting my IV. I nodded, but the truth was, rest would not come until reclaiming began. I was tired, yes, but not weak. There is a difference. Weakness bends. Fatigue pauses, then acts. Outside my room, I heard footsteps, carts, rolling pages turning at the nurse's station. Life moved. And so would I. In that sterile room, surrounded by antiseptic and the steady hum of machines, my calm returned. Not the fragile calm of childhood when quiet meant safety. This was different. Intentional. Strategic. A storm that would not scream but calculate. I was no longer reacting to what they did. I was planning what I would do next. And I would do it with precision, with law, with documentation and truth. Not to hurt them. Hurting me was their language, not mine. But to remove their hands from anything they believed they still owned. Control. Access. Authority. All revoked. Quietly. Permanently. I leaned back against the pillow. eyes closing briefly, not in surrender, but in preparation. Revenge is noisy. Justice is quiet. What I wanted was not to punish them. What I wanted was to dismantle the system that made them believe I was theirs to take from. When I opened my eyes again, I saw the officer's business card by my hand. I traced the edge of it steady. I was not the child they pushed around anymore. I was the woman who built a life, a home, a future. And I would protect it. The nurse returned with paperwork. "You will likely be discharged this afternoon," she said. "Try to rest until then." I nodded, breathing slow, deliberate. The second she left, I whispered to myself, quiet, firm, like a promise sealed in steel. They thought my silence was surrender. They don't yet know it's strategy. My phone buzzed once more. Maya, 15 minutes away. My pulse steadied. Revenge was the wrong word. The right one was reclamation. And it had already begun. Maya arrived with the energy of someone who had walked into too many battles to ever underestimate an opponent. She pushed through the curtain with her bag slung across her body, eyes sharp as she took in the monitor, the IV, the faint bruising already forming along my ribs. "You are safe now," she said first, before anything tactical. Then her voice shifted into the tone I knew well from hearing it at networking events when someone tried to bluff arrogance past her expertise. "Tell me everything." I spoke slowly, carefully, as if each sentence was a piece of evidence sliding into place. The forged deed, the mortgage activity, the confrontation, the fall. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't just messy family stuff, Lauren. This is real estate fraud. In Texas, deed fraud is a felony. It's not a misunderstanding. It's not civil. It is criminal." She flipped her notebook open. "Here is the law in plain English. If someone transfers property without permission, signs your name, or files false documents, that's deed fraud. If they profit from it or take out loans on the property, that's mortgage fraud. Both are serious. We can pursue civil damages, but also criminal charges." My stomach clenched not from fear, but from the confirmation that what happened was not just betrayal. It was a crime. Maya continued, tone precise. "We're going to file an affidavit of fraud with the county clerk. Then we'll freeze the title so nothing else can be done to your house. We'll pull the mortgage documents and subpoena communications between the lender and whoever applied. We will unwind this." A small breath escaped me. Relief did not bloom instantly. It had to push through layers of disbelief first, but it made progress. She pulled her laptop from her bag, placed it gently next to my tray. "Do you have access to your email?" I nodded, unlocking my cracked phone, propping it upright. My fingers moved slowly, a little shaky but determined. I opened my inbox, scrolled until I found the property record notifications. The timestamps stared back like blinking lights on a runway. November 20th, 4:47 p.m. Title request initiated. November 20th, 6:03 p.m. Notary certification uploaded. November 21st, 9:14 a.m. Deed transfer completed. November 21st, 10:06 a.m. Loan documents submitted. The timeline was brutal in its efficiency. While I was driving to their home, believing peace was possible, they were legally gutting my life. Maya examined the documents. "Whoever did this knew enough to move fast. They counted on you trusting them." She zoomed in on the signature panel, eyebrows furrowing. "This notary is going to be a problem for them. The signature on this stamp doesn't match public records." I blinked. "Public records." Maya smirked. "Every licensed notary in Texas has their signature on file. I've seen this one before. It's fraud. And whoever stamped this is either complicit or their seal was stolen. Either way, it collapses in court." She took screenshots, organized them into a secure file, then asked, "Did they mention needing money? Anything about opportunity or investment?" I thought of the dinner table, the talk of real estate. Caroline's smirk. "Consolidating assets." I relayed it. Maya nodded. "That's motive." She opened her banking app, pulled up transactions. A new loan account, in Caroline's name, secured by my property. I inhaled slowly. They didn't just take it. They leveraged it. She looked up, eyes steady. "This wasn't emotional. It was financial predation, and they miscalculated your tolerance." My phone buzzed again, this time not Maya, a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Margaret, my father's sister. The one family member who never played along with their fantasy version of themselves. We had spoken only sporadically, but every time she did reach out, her voice held something rare. Truth without expectation. I answered quietly. "Lauren," she said, voice trembling just enough to betray urgency. "I heard something happened. Are you all right?" I closed my eyes briefly, letting the warmth of concern settle. "I'm okay. In the hospital, but I'm okay." A pause, then steel entered her tone. "Tell me what they did." I hesitated, not out of distrust, but out of habit, that old instinct to soften what happened. But something had shifted in me. I did not protect the guilty anymore. "They forged my signature," I said. "Took my house. Tried to stop me when I tried to leave. I woke up here." Silence on the line, heavy-loaded, then a quiet exhale. "I knew they were getting worse," she whispered. "Your father, controlling is too kind a word. I always feared he'd ruin more than himself. I expected sympathy. I did not expect what came next. Tell me what you need from me." That sentence hit me harder than the kitchen counter had. Support without price, loyalty without condition. Maya leaned closer, reading my face as I listened. I swallowed. "If you can come," I said, voice soft but sure. "I don't want to face them alone." "I'll be there in 40 minutes, she replied. "And Lauren, what they did is not your burden to soften. Let them carry their own shame." The call ended, and I stared at the screen, breath steadying. Shame. They had never carried any, not when dismissing me as a child, not when erasing me as an adult. But now they would. Maya tapped her pen against her notebook. "We'll gather bank transfers next. Pull loan docs. Screenshot every timeline. Download verification emails. We create a clean chain of evidence. Systematic. Precise. The same way they thought they moved, but smarter." I nodded, feeling that cold clarity build again. She continued working beside me, her presence like armor. A nurse passed by, glanced in, saw the laptop, the papers, the intensity. People think healing is lying still. Sometimes healing starts with building the case that ensures you never bleed for the same people twice. As we gathered each file, each timestamp, each record, something crystallized. They tried to take the one thing I built with no help from them. They thought they could rewrite my life with a pen stroke. They mistook my distance for weakness. They forgot distance often means preparation. When Maya finished the digital evidence folder, she turned to me. "Next step is simple. We do not confront them emotionally. We confront them legally." I nodded. Law, not anger. Precision, not pleading. My phone buzzed once more. A final message from Aunt Margaret before she arrived. "I am proud of you for breaking the cycle. You don't go back to set yourself on fire to warm others. You light your own home." I looked at the phone and whispered to myself like a vow they tried to erase me, but I documented everything, and I am not the one who will disappear. Thanksgiving weekend in Texas has a particular stillness to it, the kind where the air holds the echo of feasts just finished, where neighborhoods smell faintly of pecan pie and leftover barbecue, where people gather outside not because they need community, but because tradition tells them they have it. By Saturday afternoon, my parents' cul-de-sac buzzed with post-holiday energy. Neighbors set up portable folding tables near driveways. Kids rode scooters in loose circles. Someone played country music from a portable speaker, low enough to feel casual, loud enough to claim the space. That was the scene I returned to, not alone, but flanked by truth. Maya walked beside me, folder tucked under her arm, courtroom calm radiating from her like armor. A Travis County deputy followed a step behind, uniform, crisp expression, unreadable. And with us came a representative from the county clerk's office carrying a slim briefcase and a look that said she had dismantled more than a few family fantasies in her time. We walked down the street like a verdict approaching. At first, no one noticed. Then, Mrs. Landon, the neighbor, who always watched through her curtains as if it were a job, froze mid-sip of sweet tea. Her eyes widened. Her hand hovered near her throat, and she whispered to someone beside her. The whisper traveled like static through dry grass. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. The Whitaker family, the polite church-going, barbecue-hosting facade of respectability, was about to face reality in broad daylight. My parents and Caroline stood in their driveway chairs arranged like a stage. My mother had on a sweater in a shade called Thanksgiving Gold, one she wore every year for photos. My father held a drink posture, confident, chin lifted, performing stability. Caroline leaned casually against the hood of her car legs, crossed sunglasses on despite the shade. When they saw us approaching, surprise flickered across their faces quick, then buried under practiced composure. Caroline took her sunglasses off slowly, a delicate flourish as if she believed whatever came next could be controlled by poise alone. My father stepped forward. "Lauren, what is all this?" "You brought officials? You should have told us. You're making a scene." I looked at him, calm, steady. "No, I'm making the truth visible." Maya opened the folder with the smoothness of decades of legal training condensed into instinct. "We are here to formally notify you of fraudulent deed transfer and mortgage activity involving the property belonging to Ms. Whitaker." The county clerk representative lifted the briefcase and pulled out documents. Certified copies, time-stamped filings, the notarization analysis. Caroline laughed brittle and too loud. "Oh my God, Lauren, you're dramatic!" "You could have just talked to us. This is family business." My father nodded, seizing her cue. "Exactly. We take care of each other. We sacrifice. You owe your family." A hush rippled across the neighbors. Someone put down their plate. Someone else whispered audible. Owe Maya did not blink. "In Texas, fraudulent conveyance of property is a felony. This is not a family squabble. This is a criminal matter." My mother stepped forward, then eyes already glassy with manufactured tears. "Lauren, sweetheart, we didn't want to bother you. We thought you'd understand. You're always so independent. We were just trying to help the family." I met her gaze unflinching. "You weren't helping the family. You were helping yourselves. And you did it by erasing me from my own life." The deputy stepped forward, voice clear. "Mr. and Ms. Whitaker, you are being served notice regarding property fraud, mortgage fraud, and unlawful restraint incident." Caroline's face dropped. That last phrase cut through whatever delusions she still clung to. Unlawful restraint. The deputy held up documents and placed them carefully in her hands. She stared at them like they might dissolve if she blinked hard enough. My father's veneer cracked first. His jaw tightened, then clenched. He lifted a hand as if authority still lived in his fingertips. "You think you can turn strangers against your own family? They don't know anything about loyalty." I lifted my voice, not loud, but unmistakably clear. "Loyalty is not slavery. Love is not debt. Family is not ownership. I owe myself my life, not your approval, not your narrative, not your entitlement." The neighbors stood still, stunned, holding their breath like witnesses in a trial. And then it came the shift, not in me, in them. Hushed voices. "She forged her daughter's signature. I heard she took a loan. That's criminal." My mother made a strangled sound, tears falling now, but not grief tears, exposure tears, the kind shed when image fractures. Caroline's nostrils flared. She threw the documents to the ground, voice cracking. "You think you're better than us? You think you deserve that house more than your own family we made you?" My reply came quiet, sharp as a needle through silk. "You didn't make me. You taught me exactly who not to become." Maya closed her folder. The county clerk rep nodded toward the deputy. "The legal actions are filed. Title freeze is active. An injunction hearing will be scheduled. Good day." The deputy gave a courteous nod, then turned. It should have ended with silence, but arrogance resists endings. My father stepped closer, voice low and venom soft. "This isn't over, Lauren. You'll regret humiliating us." I held his stare. "No. I regret believing you were capable of love that wasn't conditional." Then I turned away. Behind me, a door slammed, my mother fleeing inside to cry where she could control the lighting and the audience. Caroline stormed toward the house, muttering disbelief, clutching her hair, as if reality itself had betrayed her. My father stood frozen in the driveway, pride, dissolved power evaporating in the November air. Neighbors whispered again. Quiet justice in real time. As we walked back toward Maya's car, the world felt wider, lighter, not because the fight was over, but because the truth was no longer trapped inside walls built to silence me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a daughter standing up to parents. I felt like a woman reclaiming her future. It was not vengeance I tasted as the wind brushed my face. It was freedom, public, undeniable, earned, and humiliation wasn't mine to carry anymore. It finally belonged to the people who earned it. Court isn't like movies. There are no dramatic gasps, no slow-motion declarations of guilt. Justice in Texas arrives with fluorescent lights, stiff benches, and a judge who has seen enough human mess to recognize entitlement faster than anyone in the room. Maya and I walked into the Travis County Courthouse 3 weeks later. Winter sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long lines across the polished floor. I wore a simple navy dress, hair pulled back. Calm wrapped around me, not like defense, but certainty. I belonged here, not as a victim, as someone who built a life worth defending. The courtroom filled slowly, attorneys murmuring, deputies moving with practiced boredom, people leaning over manila folders like confessions. Then my parents walked in. My father's jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. My mother clutched her purse like a life vest. And Caroline, perfect hair, flawless makeup, walked in with sunglasses on, indoors, removing them only when she realized no one here cared about her presentation. She scanned the room until her gaze hit me. Something flickered. Not remorse. Not fear. Confusion. The same confusion a person feels when they realize their map is wrong and the world will not bend back into the shape they prefer. The judge took her seat. Papers shuffled. Case called. The clerk read charges in a voice devoid of drama but heavy with consequence. Count 1, fraudulent conveyance of real property. Count 2, mortgage fraud. Count 3, intentional property deprivation. Count 4, bodily injury and unlawful restraint. My father inhaled sharply at that one like he still believed physical force inside his own house was a private matter. My mother reached for his arm fingers, trembling. The judge glanced up. Ms. Whitaker, do you have representation? Caroline nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. My parents' attorney, a man who looked like he had seen better clients and better days, stood ready with papers. Maya's voice slid through the room like a blade dipped in professionalism. Your Honor, we are presenting certified title documents, time-stamped emails, banking records, and notarization verification. The judge adjusted her glasses. The notarization question is key. Maya nodded. We contacted the licensed notary listed. She has been retired for 2 years. Her seal was last used legally in October of the year she retired. She submitted an affidavit denying involvement. The judge turned to my father. Sir, how do you plead to the fraudulent notarization? He opened his mouth, words fighting to form into excuses. But Caroline spoke first, voice tight with desperation. We were told it was a shortcut. Everyone does it. A murmur spread through the courtroom. The judge's expression did not soften. That is not a defense. That is an admission. My father tried to stand taller. We are family. This didn't need to go to court. We were simply transferring assets within the family. The judge leveled her gaze like she had heard this argument 1,000 times. Mr. Whitaker family is not a legal defense against fraud. She turned to the clerk. And bring in the assault report. A deputy delivered the hospital report, paramedic notes, and statements. My mother murmured something like she fell. She always exaggerates under her breath, but the judge heard it. Mrs. Whitaker, do you wish to submit a contradictory medical evaluation? Silence. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. She sat very still. Caroline shifted, then asked weakly, Can't we settle this privately? The judge leaned forward. Ms. Whitaker, you attempted to steal a home, forged legal documents, and endangered your sister's life. There is nothing private about that. It's a matter of public law. Truth laid out with the blunt efficiency of Texas justice. Maya spoke again, calm but firm. We request immediate title restoration, reversal of loan activity, restitution for legal fees, and financial damages for emotional distress and injury. The judge reviewed everything. The room held its breath. Request granted. The words landed like a gavel strike to my past. The judge continued, "The fraudulent lien and deed transfer are void. Title is restored to Ms. Lauren Whitaker. The loan will be reversed and lender notified. Compensation for medical costs, legal fees, and damages are awarded." My mother let out a sound halfway between a sob and a gasp. Caroline stared at the table, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling. The judge wasn't done. As to the notary fraud and property theft, these matters will be forwarded to the district attorney for criminal review, and the bodily injury charge will proceed separately. A deputy stepped closer. My father's face drained. Caroline's lips parted in disbelief. "But family," she whispered again like the word was magic that simply refused to work. The judge's voice was steady steel. "Family is not permission to commit crimes. You should have remembered that before you attempted to take what was not yours." Then came consequences precise and unromantic. My father's credit frozen during investigation. Caroline removed from the brokerage she worked for by the following Monday. Real estate boards do not tolerate fraud optics. Their home listed for auction within weeks, debt not kind to pride. My mother sat rigid mascara smudging, blaming the world for waking her from delusion. They did not look at me on the way out, not once. But I saw it happen, something collapse in them. Not victimhood, control. The part of them that believed I would always fold because I always had before. Someone behind me whispered, "Good for her." "Proud of you, baby," another woman murmured to her friend. The judge dismissed us. Maya closed her folder. "It's done," she said softly. "Not finished, but done." I nodded, breath shaky but deep. Outside, sunlight poured over the courthouse steps. I stood there not triumphant, but grounded. They took my home. I reclaimed it. They expected silence. I chose law. They gambled on entitlement. They lost to truth. As we walked to the car, Maya glanced over. "You know," she said, "people think justice looks like rage. But sometimes it looks like paperwork and patience." I smiled then, small real. I didn't win because I fought like them. I won because I refused to. My house would soon return to my name. Their house would soon belong to a buyer and a bank. Fair. Quiet. I did not destroy them. They destroyed themselves. All I did was bring it into the light. I left the courthouse without looking back. The future was forward, and they could no longer reach for it. Fallout does not explode. It seeps. Slow, inevitable, like water finding cracks in a wall already weakened by years of strain. When the gavel fell and the truth became public record, something shifted in the world around my parents, quiet but undeniable. Their life had always been curated, a performance staged for neighbors, church acquaintances, colleagues, anyone who might confirm the illusion they clung to. My father, the self-made patriarch. My mother, the gracious homemaker. Caroline, the success story. But reputations are fragile when built on borrowed pride and stolen foundations. The Monday after court, word spread faster than they could control. Not because I shared it, I didn't need to. Truth always travels. The first cracks showed at church. My parents walked in expecting consolation, but comfort avoids those who choose deception over integrity. People shifted in pews. Eyes turned away. Greetings came clipped polite but distant. Whispered conversations fluttered like moth wings in corners. A woman who used to hug my mother every Sunday offered only a tight nod. My father reached for the familiar, the firm handshake that once symbolized respect. He extended his hand to a longtime family friend. The man hesitated, then kept both hands clasped behind his back. My father's arm lowered slowly. No words, just quiet judgment sharper than any confrontation. In suburban America, social exile rarely looks dramatic. It looks like neighbors waving at someone else instead. It looks like invitations not received. It looks like someone choosing a different checkout line at the grocery store. My mother felt it first. Her identity had always been rooted in appearances. And now the air around her changed like a perfume gone sour. She called once, her voice thin, frayed around the edges. "Lauren, people are talking. You could tell them it's a misunderstanding." I listened, then answered with the calm that comes after choosing yourself more than once. There was no misunderstanding. There was only what happened. Silence stretched long enough for realization to land. She hung up without goodbye. The next ripple hit Caroline. She had always been the one who excelled at image management. The curated Instagram life, the curated smile, the curated fiancé, Cole, a financial advisor with perfect posture and a future built on stability. But stability does not survive scandal. When Caroline lost her position at the brokerage, she called him expecting sympathy. Instead, she found reality. I heard about the charges he told her. I can't be tied to someone with legal issues and public fraud hearings. Her reply was predictable, a sharp mix of disbelief and self-pity. I did it for my family. His answer was quieter. You did it because you thought you were entitled to it. That's not family, that's greed. He returned the ring 2 days later, left it in a jewelry box on her parents' porch. No scene, no yelling, just departure. Things crack quietly before they break loudly. My parents' home, once the backdrop for barbecues and holiday decorating contests, sat oddly still. Curtains drawn more often, driveway empty more days. Christmas lights went up late that year, half-hearted flickering like they had run out of energy to pretend cheerfulness. Friends stopped visiting. Church ladies no longer dropped off casseroles. The phone stopped ringing except for debt collectors and relatives calling not to offer support, but to ask with thinly veiled shock, "What did you do?" My father withdrew into silence and resentment. He paced the house, flipped through old financial paperwork, muttered about betrayal. My mother clung to denial like it could reverse time. She told anyone who would still listen that things got blown out of proportion, that it was an internal family dispute, not criminal. But the county records did not share her script, and the neighbors had heard the sheriff's knock. My Aunt Margaret visited once weeks after the hearing. Not to comfort them, she had learned, like I had, that enabling harm is not compassion. She told me later what she saw. Your father looked smaller, she said, not physically, just less. Like the only thing holding him up had been the belief that he was allowed to take from others. When that belief crumbled, so did he. Carolyn tried to rebuild her life with the same tactics she had always relied on: grand declarations, big plans, Instagram optimism. But ambition without integrity collapses fast. People remembered her face from the driveway confrontation. Memory does not fade when truth is public. She applied to new firms. None hired her. She reached out to old friends. Many did not respond. One message leaked a screenshot where she complained that her own sister ruined her life. Comments below it didn't agree with her. Someone wrote, "Your sister didn't ruin your life. Actions do." That line spread. I did not share it, but I saw it. Justice is not just court rulings. It is accountability sticking to a person even when the spotlight moves. As winter stretched into the new year, the Whitaker home changed. Yard neglected. Shutters closed midday. For sale sign planted like a tombstone of pride. The bank wanted repayment. Pride didn't cover debt. Auction date posted. My mother stood at the front window the day the sign went up. A neighbor told me she cried not out of loss but out of exposure. My father refused to answer the door when the real estate agent arrived. Caroline moved into a small apartment across town, far from manicured lawns. She didn't leave a forwarding address with most relatives. Shame is lonely when ego burns bridges. And me, I did not celebrate their unraveling. But I did breathe easier. Not triumph, closure. Quiet sadness braided with relief. It hurt to understand finally and fully that some families do not break, they rot. And when rot is exposed to daylight, it crumbles on its own, no force needed. I did not destroy them. They destroyed themselves when they tried to own what was never theirs. I simply stopped carrying the consequences for them. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through empty driveways and unanswered calls. Sometimes it looks like a holiday table left with one chair quietly missing and no one daring to speak her name. And sometimes it feels like walking away, knowing you broke a cycle instead of letting it break you. I didn't lose a family. I simply stopped pretending I ever had one. Winter passed, then spring, and with it came a gentler rhythm to life. My house was fully mine again by then, the paperwork clean, title restored. Locks changed mail addressed only to me. Sometimes I would sit on the front porch in the evenings with a cup of chamomile tea, breathing in the quiet, feeling the steady beat of a life that I fought for and finally secured. Healing did not rush me. It arrived like sunlight through blinds, inch by inch, day by day. My ribs stopped aching. My sleep became deep again. I redecorated my living room with warm earth tones, not because I needed to erase the past, but because I wanted my present to feel intentional. This space was not built from rebellion, it was built from reclamation. In late June, 6 months after the court hearing, I moved into a modern apartment in downtown Austin, closer to my office and walking distance to the lake trail. A new chapter deserved a new setting. Plants lined the windows, books stacked in soft piles. Fresh paint, fresh start, fresh air. My home felt lived in and safe, layered with quiet contentment and the sound of my own footsteps belonging fully to me. On a humid Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky glows pale orange before fading into dusky blue, someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks. Hesitant but insistent. I didn't startle. My building had good security, and unexpected knocks were usually neighbors borrowing sugar or Amazon packages delivered to the wrong door. I padded across the living room in soft socks and opened the door just enough to see who was there. My breath stilled. On the other side stood my parents and Caroline. They looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. My father's posture sagged, his shoulders hunched in a way I had never seen. My mother clutched the strap of her handbag with white-knuckled desperation eyes, red and tired. Caroline's hair was pulled into a low ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her confidence stripped away like old wallpaper peeling. For a moment, none of us spoke. The hallway light hummed above us, indifferent to this uncomfortable reunion. Finally, my mother's voice cracked the silence. "Lauren, honey, we didn't know where else to go. We lost everything." She swallowed hard. "We need a place to stay, just until we get back on our feet. Family helps family." My father cleared his throat, eyes darting toward my apartment like he could already imagine his belongings inside. "We made mistakes. It's time to rebuild. Together." The word together landed like an object dropped from a great height, heavy, untrue, splintering on impact. Then Caroline spoke face tight with resentment disguised as humility. "We thought you'd understand. You're doing so well. You can spare the space." My fingers curled around the door edge, knuckles cool against the wood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shift my stance. I simply stood there, absorbing the moment, fully letting it settle into my bones. Their need was not rooted in love. It was rooted in loss. They had not come seeking forgiveness. They had come seeking shelter. They did not want reconnection. They wanted access. Old patterns flickered, trying to surface guilt, obligation, that reflex to cushion them from the consequences of their choices. But healing had reshaped me. I did not carry them anymore. Caroline's voice sharpened when I didn't immediately speak. "You can't seriously just shut us out. We're family." The irony tasted like steel. I opened the door only slightly wider enough for them to see me fully. I breathed once, slow and steady. My voice came soft, clear, utterly grounded. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And peace requires a locked door. My mother's face crumpled. My father took a half step as if to protest. Caroline's mouth opened, indignation rising. I did not wait to hear it. I closed the door. Slowly. Not with anger, but with finality. The latch clicked first. Then the deadbolt slid into place with a solid, unmistakable weight. That sound, the metal locking into its home, felt like ceremony, like a boundary being not only set, but honored. I stood there for a moment, hand resting lightly on the door, listening to the muffled sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. One pair hurried, one hesitated, one dragged. Then silence returned, clean, untangled, mine. I turned and walked back into my living room, my steps sure, my heartbeat steady. The evening light cast a golden glow across the rug. My plants rustled gently as the air conditioner kicked on. Peace did not feel loud or triumphant. It felt like exhaling. It felt like choosing myself without apology. It felt like a life built on truth, not illusion. I curled up on my sofa legs tucked beneath me and let the quiet settle. I did not feel victorious. I felt free. Justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes justice is a door you keep closed because opening it again would invite back the version of yourself that did not know her worth. I did not shut out my family. I shut out chaos manipulation and inherited pain. And in doing so, I let myself in. Mornings feel different now. Soft. Honest. I wake to sunlight spilling through sheer curtains, plants stretching toward the glass, as if they too have learned the language of new beginnings. My home office looks out over downtown Austin, the skyline steady and familiar. Cranes still dotting the horizon like reminders that this city and I never stop building. The desk is simple oak with worn edges. My laptop rests beside a mug that reads, "I choose peace." A small candle flickers lavender and cedarwood. Behind me, shelves hold books on boundaries, growth marketing strategy, and a framed photo of my Aunt Margaret smiling in my kitchen the day I returned home after court when she insisted on bringing me peach cobbler because victories deserve sweetness. She texted this morning, checking in like she always does now. Steady love, not performative obligation. The kind of family you choose, not the kind that claims ownership over you. I type for a while, working through emails, reviewing campaign notes. The quiet is companionable, not isolating. And then I feel a soft weight on my foot. I look down. Daisy lifts her head. Brown eyes, warm tail thumping once, gentle, hopeful. She's a rescue, a shy shepherd mix I adopted from the Austin shelter 2 months after everything ended. She had been overlooked, too anxious, too quiet in a world that favors loud confidence. But she didn't need to perform for me. She simply needed safety space patience. We understood each other instantly. I scratch behind her ear, smiling when she presses into my hand. She trusts me now, not because I earned it through force, but because I earned it through consistency. That's real loyalty. That's real family. When the afternoon sun reaches its warmest, Daisy and I head to the lake trail. Joggers pass cyclists, ring bells, kayaks glide across the water. Life hums around us, ordinary and beautiful. No spotlight, no crisis, no hidden threats disguised as love. I breathe deep, the scent of fresh grass and water and Austin heat settling in my chest like gratitude. Healing is not loud. It is quiet moments where fear used to live. It is choosing gentleness where chaos once demanded space. Back home, I open my journal, the same one I've written in every night since I came back from the hospital. I turn to a fresh page. My handwriting is steady. I write, "Blood ties, drown you chosen family, lifts you." I pause, then add, "Peace is not what you find, it's what you protect." I close the journal slowly. Some stories hurt to live but heal when spoken. And some silence is powerful, not because it hides pain, but because it keeps peace intact. I look around my home, my sanctuary, and think of the woman I used to be in that family house. Quiet, careful, afraid to upset the balance. Now the balance lives inside me, not outside. That's the difference. Growth does not always roar. Sometimes it sighs softly in a sunlit room with a dog asleep at your feet. I take a breath steady and full and face the camera on my desk. Time to share. Time to give someone else permission to save themselves. Before I hit record, before the story begins again for someone who needs it, I speak quietly, just to myself, just to the universe that carried me here. I didn't lose them. I returned to myself. I press record. My voice finds its calm, grounded rhythm, the one built on truth instead of fear. If you ever rebuilt yourself after family tried to break you, tell your story below. Someone needs to hear it. And if you're still in the middle of your storm, keep going. Blood isn't always family, and peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose. Daisy lifts her head again, ears perked, tail sweeping the floor. I laugh softly, reach down to pet her and hit post. Healing is not a destination. It's a life you build, one locked door, one boundary, one peaceful morning at a time. And I am finally fully home.